Jamal Roberts was not just another face in the bustling city. He was a vibrant spirit, a dedicated worker, and an enthusiastic cyclist who embraced every opportunity to pedal through life. At 32, he had built a reputation as a reliable employee at a local bike shop, where he not only sold bicycles but also shared his passion for cycling with customers. His colleagues admired him for his work ethic and the infectious joy he brought to the shop, often brightening even the gloomiest days with his laughter. On weekends, Jamal transformed into a cycling enthusiast, exploring the city's winding trails and hidden paths. He reveled in the freedom that came with riding. The wind against his face and the rhythmic sound of wheels on pavement invigorated him. For Jamal, cycling was more than just a hobby. It was an escape from the daily grind and a way to connect with nature. His friends often joked that he could ride for hours without breaking a sweat, sharing stories of his adventures on two wheels. But life took an unexpected turn one fateful afternoon when an unfortunate incident shattered his peaceful existence. While riding home from a weekend excursion, Jamal collided with a parked car. The impact was minor, but the aftermath was anything but. The car owner, a man named Greg, claimed that Jamal had recklessly damaged his vehicle and insisted on pursuing legal action. In an instant, Jamal went from being an admired member of his community to the target of public scrutiny. As news of the incident spread, people's opinions quickly turned against him. The media sensationalized the story, casting Jamal as a careless cyclist who refused to take responsibility for his actions. Friends began to distance themselves, and whispers of judgment followed him wherever he went. Jamal felt isolated and bewildered by the swift shift in perception. How could they believe that he would intentionally cause damage when all he wanted was to enjoy a simple ride? Despite the mounting pressure and the weight of false accusations, Jamal held on to hope. He knew deep down that he was innocent and that the truth would eventually surface. He sought legal counsel from a lawyer who believed in his innocence and was determined to fight back against the unfounded charges. As preparations for court began, Jamal steeled himself for what lay ahead, ready to reclaim his narrative and prove that sometimes appearances can be deceiving. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Jamal decided to take a long ride through the picturesque outskirts of the city, where green fields met tranquil lakes. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting a golden hue over everything as he navigated familiar routes, feeling exhilarated with every turn of his bike's wheels. It was days like these that reminded him why he loved cycling so much: the feeling of freedom, the refreshing breeze, and the connection with nature. However, as he rode back home, his mind wandered to the day ahead. He looked forward to recounting his adventures to friends at the bike shop and perhaps even joining them for a post-ride barbecue. Lost in pleasant thoughts, he approached a quiet residential street where many vehicles were parked neatly along the curb. Suddenly, without warning, Jamal's attention was drawn to a car door being flung open by a middle-aged man who seemed preoccupied with something inside his vehicle. Belligerently taken off guard, Jamal instinctively swerved to avoid collision. In that split second of panic, his bike spun out of control as he tried to navigate around both the door and the car itself. With an unsettling thud, Jamal felt his bike collide against the parked car's side just hard enough to reverberate through his bones. The impact jolted him but luckily didn't throw him off balance. He immediately came to a stop and assessed the situation. Breathing heavily and heart racing, Jamal quickly dismounted and inspected both himself and his bike for any damage. The driver remained silent for a moment before emerging from his vehicle, an expression of disbelief etched on his face. Greg, a man known in the neighborhood for being hot-headed, glowered at Jamal as if he had just committed a grave crime. "You wrecked my car!" Greg exclaimed. Confusion coursed through Jamal as he reached up in disbelief and saw only a small scratch on the paintwork. It was hardly worth making a scene over. But before Jamal could explain himself or apologize, Greg pulled out his phone with alarming speed. "I'm calling the police! You'll pay for this!" His voice dripped with outrage as other onlookers began gathering around them. Jamal's heart sank. What had begun as an innocent ride had spiraled into chaos in mere moments. As words flew back and forth, accusations from Greg while locals failed to notice the truth, Jamal felt trapped in a brewing storm beneath that sunny sky, unaware that this incident would soon evolve into accusations that could irreparably alter his life. As Jamal stood beside his bike, still reeling from the collision, he quickly realized that the situation was escalating far beyond what he had anticipated. Greg's loud accusations drew the attention of nearby residents and passers-by, transforming the incident into a spectacle. Whispers began circulating among the gathering crowd, each person interpreting the scene through their own lens. Some looked at Jamal with disdain, while others exchanged knowing glances that suggested they believed Greg's version of events without question. "Did you see that? He just barreled right into that car," one bystander exclaimed, his voice rising above the murmur of confusion. Others nodded in agreement, hastily forming an opinion based solely on a fleeting moment rather than understanding the complexities of the situation. It didn't take long for Greg to use the crowd's energy to further bolster his claims. "I was just sitting here," Greg continued, pointing at his car as if it were a victim in a crime scene. "This reckless cyclist comes out of nowhere and wrecks my property. He needs to pay for this." His voice brimmed with outrage, and although Jamal tried to explain how he swerved to avoid an accident with Greg's door, nobody seemed interested in hearing his side. Emboldened by Greg's fiery rhetoric, other witnesses began jumping into the fray. "I saw him speeding down this street. Cyclists have no respect for parked cars," declared one woman, raising her hands dramatically as if she were a seasoned courtroom lawyer. Each word fueled public sentiment against Jamal as they painted him as a careless biker who had put everyone at risk. As news of the incident spread through social media like wildfire, local news outlets caught wind of the story and began covering it extensively. Sensational headlines appeared online. "Cyclist wrecks parked car in reckless display." There were photographs taken from odd angles that exaggerated the damage and sparked outrage among readers who hadn't witnessed the events firsthand. Jamal felt utterly helpless as his reputation disintegrated before his eyes. He was being portrayed not just as an irresponsible cyclist but as someone whose actions represented a larger problem within urban cycling culture. Friends who once laughed with him at the bike shop suddenly became distant, unsure whether associating with him might tarnish their own names amid such public outcry. Chained to grief and disbelief, Jamal came home feeling defeated, questioning how quickly perceptions could shift based on incomplete narratives rather than truth. It was clear he had become a scapegoat in a society quick to judge without understanding, a cycle of blame spiraling out of control around him. Despite this turmoil, deep within him simmered a determination to fight back against these unfounded allegations and reclaim not only his name but also the sense of justice he cherished deeply. As Jamal sat in his small apartment, staring at the stack of papers detailing the lawsuit against him, a whirlwind of emotions surged within him. Confusion, anger, and a profound sense of injustice enveloped his thoughts. The weight of the accusations felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried on his bike. He couldn't fathom how a brief moment of misfortune had spiraled into what felt like a personal attack on his character. "Reckless cyclist," he muttered under his breath, frustration bubbling up inside him. How could they label him that way? He thought back to all those hours spent in the bike shop, passionately encouraging customers to embrace cycling as a safe and responsible means of transportation. Yet here he was, portrayed as a menace on two wheels, a stereotype he had never embodied. With each passing day, as more articles were published and social media exploded with opinions, Jamal felt increasingly alienated from his community. Friends who once celebrated his cycling feats now hesitated to reach out, wary of the scandal that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. "What if they think I really did it?" he mused, engulfed by doubt that began to creep into his mind. The very people who understood his love for biking now viewed him through a lens of suspicion. Despite this overwhelming tide against him, Jamal's determination only grew stronger. He knew the truth and clung fiercely to it. He was not reckless. He was simply an individual caught in an unfortunate circumstance. "I have to fight this," he told himself resolutely as he pored over the details with his lawyer during their meetings. They combed through witness statements and photographs from the scene, searching for inconsistencies that might help reveal the real story behind the claims. In those moments of strategizing and planning, something ignited within him, a fire fueled by a desire not just to defend himself but also to confront the unjust assumptions people could make when faced with incomplete narratives. He envisioned standing before the judge and presenting his side of the story with clarity and conviction. "If I can just get them to see the truth," he thought, "maybe I can turn this around." Jamal's heart raced as he prepared for court hearings. Envisioning every detail made him more resolute. Injustice did not frighten him, rather, it steeled his resolve. He saw this challenge as an opportunity, not just to reclaim his name but also to shed light on how quickly judgment can fall without understanding the whole picture. He was ready to rise above the chaos surrounding him and show everyone who he truly was, not a reckless cyclist but a man determined to uphold justice against all odds. In the wake of the accusations, Jamal understood that he needed professional help to navigate the murky waters of the legal system. After conducting some online research and asking for recommendations, he finally found a lawyer named Margaret Wright who specialized in personal injury cases and had a reputation for taking on challenging situations. She was a fierce advocate for her clients, known for her ability to see beyond surface narratives and dig into the truths that lay beneath. When they first met, Jamal felt an instant sense of relief. Margaret listened intently as he recounted his story, nodding thoughtfully as he detailed the collision and the subsequent fallout. "You're not just fighting a lawsuit," she said. "You're battling public perception. But we will focus on what happened and ensure your side is heard." With Margaret's guidance, Jamal began to prepare for the legal battle ahead. They met several times in her modest office filled with law books and case files. Each meeting left Jamal feeling empowered. She encouraged him to gather evidence that could support his claims, including photographs from the scene taken by nearby witnesses, as well as any stray pieces of information that painted a more accurate picture of the incident. Margaret emphasized the importance of eyewitness accounts, urging Jamal to reach out to anyone who might have seen what really happened that day. "We need to show that you weren't the reckless cyclist Greg wants everyone to believe you are," she explained fervently. With newfound determination, Jamal began contacting friends and acquaintances who frequented the area where the accident took place. Some even agreed to write statements confirming his version of the events. As days turned into weeks, Jamal's anxiety mounted while awaiting notifications from the court. He spent countless hours preparing for his defense, practicing how he would present his case and discussing potential strategies with Margaret. They reviewed every piece of evidence carefully, focusing on inconsistencies in Greg's story and identifying discrepancies in witness testimonies. The prospect of standing before a judge began to feel both daunting and invigorating. Jamal envisioned himself taking the stand, recounting his experience with clarity, fighting back against the narrative that had unjustly defined him. The road ahead would be anything but easy. He knew that public opinion might remain skeptical despite his best efforts. However, with Margaret at his side, he felt bolstered by a sense of purpose, the desire not only to clear his name but also to hold accountable those who had rushed to judgment without understanding the full story. Amidst this turmoil, Jamal was determined to emerge victorious in court. He understood that this battle was about more than just himself. It represented a stand against misinformation and an opportunity to fight for truth in a world quick to cast blame based on fleeting impressions. Together with Margaret, he was ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead in this legal fight that had become so much larger than himself. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the atmosphere inside the courtroom was thick with tension. Jamal stepped through the heavy wooden doors, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was a blend of stark white walls and polished oak furnishings, exuding an air of authority that made Jamal feel small in comparison. Rows of wooden benches lined the sides, filled with curious onlookers eager to witness the proceedings unfold. At the front of the room sat Judge Emily Carter, a woman known for her sharp intellect and unwavering commitment to justice. Her reputation as a fair but firm authority figure preceded her. She had a way of commanding respect with her mere presence. As she entered the courtroom, all eyes turned to her, and a hush fell over the crowd. Judge Carter adjusted her glasses and surveyed the room with keen scrutiny, her expression one of professionalism that brooked no nonsense. Jamal took a seat at the plaintiff's table beside Margaret, who whispered encouraging words as she reviewed her notes. He could feel the weight of Greg's gaze from across the room. Greg sat with his lawyer, both appearing confident and self-assured. The sense of animosity radiating from Greg made Jamal's stomach churn. It was as if every accusation he had faced over the past weeks culminated in that moment. As the proceedings began, Margaret stood to address the court, outlining their case while emphasizing Jamal's innocence. Her voice was steady, but Jamal could sense her own underlying tension. She was fighting not just for him but also against the tide of public opinion that had already deemed him guilty. He watched as she presented their evidence, eyewitness testimonies and photographs depicting the scene from angles that contradicted Greg's claims. Judge Carter listened intently, nodding occasionally as Margaret detailed their arguments. Jamal felt a flicker of hope with each point made. Perhaps this would be the turning point he so desperately needed. Yet he knew that in court, anything could happen. The opposing counsel wasted no time challenging Margaret's assertions. They painted Jamal as a reckless cyclist who disregarded common sense, using phrases like dangerous behavior and public menace. Each word felt like a stab to Jamal's heart. His mind raced as he fought back against feelings of despair. He had to remain focused. Amidst this back-and-forth exchange, Jamal noticed Judge Carter's brow furrowing slightly, a sign that she was weighing the arguments carefully. He felt reassured knowing she would not let emotional appeals cloud her judgment. As each side presented their case, Jamal clung to his belief in truth. He knew that beneath all the noise and chaos lay an opportunity for justice. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly until finally, after what felt like hours, Judge Carter called for a brief recess. As everyone rose to step outside briefly, Jamal exchanged nervous glances with Margaret. They both understood that when they returned to court, it would be time for Jamal to take the stand. This moment was more than just about him. It represented a battle against false narratives and a chance to reclaim his life from an unjust accusation that threatened to define him forever. As the courtroom plunged back into session after the recess, the tension in the air was palpable. Judge Carter returned to her seat, and Jamal steeled himself for the imminent witness testimonies that could make or break the case. The audience settled into an anxious silence, eager to hear from those who had witnessed the incident. The first witness called was Greg, the car's owner. He stood with a confident demeanor, but Jamal couldn't shake off a sense of unease as he listened to Greg recount his version of events. "I was parked on the side of the road, and suddenly this cyclist came out of nowhere, speeding right toward my car," Greg declared vehemently. "He swerved at the last second and banged right into my passenger door." His voice had an edge of indignation, painting himself as an innocent victim in what he described as a reckless display. Jamal felt a knot tighten in his stomach as Greg's testimony unfolded. The man's account seemed overly rehearsed while lacking specifics about what led to the collision. Margaret wasted no time in challenging him. She probed into details about just how fast Jamal had been cycling and interrogated him about whether he had actually checked for cyclists before opening his door. "Isn't it true," she pressed, "that you were looking inside your car when you flung open that door without checking?" Greg stuttered slightly but maintained his composure. "I didn't see him because I was focused on getting something from my glove compartment," he admitted reluctantly. Next up was a bystander named Carla, whose testimony brought new insights to light. Upon being questioned by Margaret, she described how Jamal had swerved instinctively to avoid Greg's suddenly opened door rather than speeding recklessly. "I saw everything clearly," Carla asserted confidently. "He didn't seem like a reckless cyclist to me at all. He tried to avoid hitting that car." Her words struck like a beacon of hope in Jamal's heart. But not all testimonies carried equal weight. Another witness claimed they saw Jamal riding without regard for safety and further reinforced Greg's depiction of him as dangerous. The discrepancies began to mount, and each contradictory statement heightened the suspense within those courtroom walls. Jamal could feel eyes shifting back and forth between witnesses, the murmurs rising as people weighed their accounts against one another. With each testimony, tension escalated further. Who would be believed? Would clarity emerge from conflicting narratives? Jamal noticed Judge Carter leaning forward with interest as her brow furrowed more deeply during some accounts than others. It was apparent she sought truth amidst chaos. The climax reached its peak when Margaret called upon an expert who specialized in traffic accidents and cycling safety. He explained how often cyclists are inaccurately portrayed due to preconceived notions stemming from public misconceptions about their behavior on roads, a teetering balance between judgment and understanding. Jamal absorbed every word intently. It felt like they were unearthing layers of buried truths that might finally lead him toward vindication. As arguments swirled around him, a newfound determination ignited within. Regardless of what others thought or said, he knew that justice still awaited in these proceedings where facts could ultimately shine through deception. As the courtroom settled into a tense silence following the witness testimonies, Jamal felt an unexpected surge of hope from the unfolding events. He could sense that Margaret was priming something audacious, a tactic he had not anticipated. After consulting with her quietly, she stood confidently before Judge Carter, making a bold proposal that caught everyone's attention. "Your Honor," Margaret began, her voice ringing clear and steady, "I would like to introduce an unconventional method to uncover the truth in this case, an interactive session of truth or lie." A murmur rippled through the courtroom at Margaret's suggestion, eyebrows raised in surprise and skepticism among spectators. Judge Carter leaned forward, intrigued but cautious. "Explain how this would be executed," she prompted, her interest piqued by the originality of the approach. Margaret outlined her plan. "By allowing both parties, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Gregg, to answer direct questions that will be presented to them in an engaging format, we can explore the veracity of their claims while keeping the atmosphere focused and respectful. Each participant will either affirm or deny statements related to the incident, providing the court with insights into their honesty and perspective." Somewhat outlandish, Jamal thought. He wasn't sure if it would sway the judge or if it was simply a risky gamble. Yet there was undeniable potential for revealing the truth hidden beneath layers of conflicting accounts. The game would also involve other key witnesses, so their perspectives could be reevaluated in real time. Judge Carter regarded Margaret thoughtfully. "This is an unconventional approach," she said slowly. "But if both parties consent and it remains constructive, I am open to allowing it." With a nod from Jamal and Gregg's reluctant agreement for the sake of establishing his own narrative, Margaret's plan set into motion a fresh wave of anticipation. Jamal felt adrenaline coursing through him. Perhaps this game would highlight discrepancies in Gregg's account that had gone unnoticed or provide clarity around the contradictory testimonies. As they prepared for the session, tension electrified the air. The audience leaned forward in their seats, curiosity piqued by this surprising twist in the legal proceedings. Who would hold steadfast to their truth under direct questioning? Would Gregg crumble under scrutiny? Margaret laid out ground rules for fair engagement. Each statement would require not just a simple yes or no, but also explanation behind their choices if necessary, a chance to reveal emotions and underlying motivations masked by their earlier testimonies. This would not just be a test of facts, but a deeper exploration into integrity and intent. Jamal found himself wrapping his mind around this unconventional method. It was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. As the court transformed into an arena of candidness, he realized that he needed to embrace this moment. If anything could peel back the layers of deceit surrounding him, perhaps it was this unique opportunity to play a game where nothing but truth could prevail. He glanced at Margaret, her eyes sparkling with determination and excitement. It was clear she understood the stakes as much as he did. With hearts racing in unison, they set to unveil, piece by piece, the true story that led to this contentious day in court. As the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, Margaret prepared to explain the mechanics of the truth or lie game. A palpable tension filled the air, with everyone keenly aware that this unconventional approach could pivot the case in either direction. The judge, jury, and audience leaned in, eager to grasp how this exercise would unfold. "Your Honor, here's how it will work," Margaret began, her voice steady and confident. "Each party involved, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Gregg, will answer a series of statements related to the incident. They will use a simple signal, a thumbs up for truth and a thumbs down for lie. After each statement, they can provide a brief explanation for their response, allowing us to delve deeper into their reasoning." The gallery murmured softly, intrigued by the prospect of such an interactive and revealing session. Jamal felt his pulse quicken. This was more than just a series of questions, it was an opportunity to showcase his truth in real time. Judge Carter nodded thoughtfully. "I assume each party has prepared their statements and is ready to engage," she said, glancing meaningfully at both sides. Jamal shared a look of determination with Margaret before turning his focus back to the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," Margaret confirmed. "We have ensured that all statements are relevant and focused on uncovering facts pertaining to the moment in question." With a wave of her gavel, Judge Carter signaled the start of the game, her expression resolute as she urged everyone to maintain decorum. "Let's keep this productive and fair," she reminded the court, her authority commanding silence as she flipped through her notes. Margaret initiated the game by presenting the first statement. "Mr. Gregg," she addressed the car owner directly, "you opened your car door without looking for oncoming cyclists before Mr. Roberts collided with your vehicle." Gregg took a deep breath and raised his thumb downwards, signaling a lie. The courtroom erupted in whispers, but Margaret continued calmly. "Would you care to elaborate on your response?" "I was focused on finding my registration," Gregg replied defensively. "I didn't see anyone coming and didn't open my door recklessly." Next, Margaret directed the question toward Jamal. "Mr. Roberts, was your cycling speed within legal limits at the time of the incident?" Jamal's heart raced as he raised his thumb up high, affirming it was a truth. "I wasn't speeding. I always adhered to local traffic laws," he explained firmly, feeling a mix of resolve and vulnerability. As the game progressed, several statements sparked heated exchanges and moments of clarity. Each response peeled back layers from both parties, revealing underlying motivations that had previously gone unspoken. Jamal noticed how some members of the jury leaned forward, entranced by the unfolding drama, an engagement not typical in standard courtroom procedures. Even Judge Carter found herself intrigued. She often interjected with questions that challenged participants to clarify or justify their responses further. The atmosphere shifted as the game unfolded, creating an environment where truth had an opportunity to surface amid previous biases. The final statement sent ripples through the room. "Mr. Gregg, do you believe that Mr. Roberts attempted to avoid your vehicle when you opened your door?" As tension peaked, everyone watched Gregg's reaction closely, the weight of honesty bearing down amid his decision. Responses from both sides showcased not only their positions but also hint at deeper truths entwined within their interactive journey. It became clearer that this unconventional tactic had set the stage for potentially transformative revelations as Jamal fought against misrepresentation and injustice in pursuit of his rightful narrative. As the truth or lie game progressed, the courtroom atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Each statement posed by Margaret was met with nervous reactions from both Gregg and Jamal, but it was the responses that began to unravel the carefully constructed narrative Gregg had presented. "Mr. Gregg," Margaret began, her voice steady, "you claimed that you were parked legally and didn't see Mr. Roberts approaching when you opened your door. Is it true that you were not looking at all?" She gestured for him to respond. Gregg raised his thumb downwards, signaling a lie. "I was just reaching for my registration. I didn't think anyone would be coming so fast." The audience reacted with a collective murmur as Margaret pressed further. "Didn't you also say earlier that you were distracted by an argument on your phone at that moment? Wouldn't that mean you weren't paying attention?" Caught off guard, Gregg hesitated before responding. "I may have been. But still." "Still what?" Margaret interrupted gently but firmly, her gaze piercing through him. "If you were distracted, then how could you possibly assert that Mr. Roberts was speeding?" The tension in the room shifted palpably as jurors exchanged glances. Some leaned forward, intrigued by this emerging inconsistency. It was becoming increasingly clear that Gregg's account of events might not hold up under scrutiny. Next, Margaret directed a statement towards Jamal. "Mr. Roberts, did you have ample time to brake or maneuver away from the vehicle?" Jamal raised his thumb up high for truth. "Absolutely," he asserted confidently. "I saw the doors swing open and reacted instinctively to avoid a collision." Margaret seized this opportunity to connect dots for the jury. "So if you had time to react and weren't speeding as claimed, Doesn't that cast doubt on Mr. Gregg's assertion of your recklessness? A ripple of realization spread through the courtroom as more jurors nodded in understanding. They could see how Jamal's truth contrasted sharply with Gregg's narrative. Then came a pivotal moment when Margaret asked another critical question. Mr. Gregg, did you ever consider using your mirrors before opening your car door? Gregg's reaction was telling. He faltered and raised his thumb down again. Another lie. His expression showed signs of frustration mixed with apprehension. I don't remember checking. Margaret pressed on with intensity, shifting her approach slightly. Isn't it true that drivers are instructed to check their surroundings before opening doors? Or perhaps it's more convenient to blame someone else for your oversight? Gasps rippled through the audience at this revelation, resonating like thunder in the silence of the court. It became evident to many present that Gregg's story was unraveling amidst these pointed inquiries. As each successive statement brought new revelations, Jamal felt a burgeoning sense of hope swell within him. The tide of public perception was beginning to shift in his favor. The jurors were no longer passive observers. They were engaged participants witnessing firsthand how inconsistencies could be illuminated through honest discourse. Judge Carter observed intently, her brow furrowed as she noted these inconsistencies unfolding before her eyes. A legal dance where truth and deception collided spectacularly in real time. By the end of this session, it became crystal clear to everyone present. This game had transcended mere entertainment. It had become a revealing inquiry into human behavior and accountability, a vital step toward unveiling genuine truth hidden beneath layers of accusation and misunderstanding. As the truth or lie game progressed, Judge Emily Carter's demeanor evolved in response to the unfolding revelations. Initially seated with a calm and composed presence, she was an image of authority dressed in her black robes, ready to uphold the law. However, as Margaret's incisive questions began to peel back layers of deceit, the judge's brow furrowed in concentration, indicating her growing engagement with the proceedings. When Gregg hesitated and struggled to maintain his narrative amid Margaret's relentless inquiries, Judge Carter's expression shifted from neutrality to acute interest. Each time she saw Gregg falter or his assertions contradicted by evidence, a slight tightening around her mouth hinted at her disapproval of his evasiveness. It was evident that she was not just a passive observer but an active seeker of truth, determined to see justice served. At one pivotal moment, when it became apparent that Gregg had failed to check for oncoming cyclists before opening his car door, an action that contradicted basic safety protocols, the judge leaned forward in her chair. Her eyes narrowed as she absorbed the implications of this revelation, recognizing how it could shift the narrative entirely. In that moment, her authority transformed. She was no longer merely facilitating the process, but rather embodying the weight of moral responsibility in determining the outcome. As Jamal confidently affirmed his own truth, raising his thumb for truth and explaining how he had instinctively swerved to avoid collision, Judge Carter's posture straightened. The shift was subtle yet powerful. Where once she had merely presided over the court, she now actively sought to understand the nuances of each statement made in front of her. She watched closely as jurors exchanged glances and leaned forward in their seats, clearly intrigued by Jamal's assertion and the contrast it presented against Gregg's narrative. The atmosphere grew electric when Margaret posed her most charged question yet. Mr. Gregg, did you consider checking your mirrors before opening your door? As Gregg again raised his thumb downwards, signaling another lie, Judge Carter's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise at his admission. It was a moment that encapsulated the essence of the courtroom drama. Truths were being uncovered that had previously lain buried beneath layers of accusation. With each revelation, it became increasingly clear to Judge Carter that this case hinged not only on facts but also on the integrity of those presenting them. Her expression softened momentarily as she glanced at Jamal, sensing his desperation for justice and a chance to reclaim his honor. It was as if she recognized him not merely as a defendant but as a victim of circumstance seeking recognition amidst public scorn. By the end of the session, Judge Carter had transformed from a stern overseer into an engaged arbiter actively participating in the pursuit of truth. Her commitment to justice resonated throughout the courtroom as she prepared to weigh the emerging evidence critically. The stakes were rising, and in this revealing atmosphere, It was evident that Judge Carter would ultimately ensure that honesty prevailed over deception, making it clear that in her court, integrity would not be overlooked. The courtroom fell into a charged silence as everyone awaited Judge Emily Carter's verdict. After the exhaustive session of the truth or lie game, a sense of palpable tension hung in the air, the kind you could almost touch. Jurors exchanged anxious glances, their expressions reflecting inner turmoil as they contemplated the conflicting narratives that had played out before them. Jamal sat at the plaintiff's table with Margaret beside him, his heart pounding in his chest. Each tick of the clock echoed like thunder, amplifying his anxiety. He could sense his pulse quickening as thoughts raced through his mind. Had they presented enough evidence to sway the court? Had he portrayed his truth convincingly? With a deliberative rhythm, Judge Carter finally cleared her throat, commanding attention from all corners of the courtroom. Resting her hands on the edge of her desk, she began to reflect on the proceedings. This case has highlighted the critical importance of accountability and honesty in our daily interactions, she remarked, her voice steady yet poignant. It has revealed how easily perceptions can be clouded by incomplete narratives. As her words resonated throughout the room, Jamal felt a mixture of dread and hope swell within him. This was it, the moment everything hinged upon. Please let this be enough, he muttered under his breath as he glanced at Margaret, whose expression was a blend of assurance and anticipation. Mr. Roberts stands accused of recklessness, Judge Carter continued, her gaze shifting directly to Jamal as if affirming his very presence in the courtroom. However, through diligent questioning and honest testimony presented during this unique format today, we have unearthed nuances that challenge that assertion. Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat, beads of perspiration forming on his forehead as he realized that the judge's remarks were focusing on inconsistencies in his account. Based on Mr. Roberts' demonstration of sound judgment when faced with an unexpected circumstance and Mr. Gregg's admission regarding distractions leading to unsafe behavior, Judge Carter elaborated thoughtfully. I find it imperative to conclude that Mr. Roberts acted within reasonable safety measures given the situation. The weight of her declaration sank heavily into the room like a stone dropped into a still pond. Jamal's heart raced. He dared not breathe as he awaited the final verdict. With that in mind, she declared with unwavering conviction, I rule in favor of Mr. Jamal Roberts and declare him innocent of all charges against him. A wave of relief washed over Jamal like an ocean tide crashing upon dry sand. Tears pricked at his eyes as disbelief and gratitude collided within him. The jury's expressions softened. Some blinked back their own resolve to see justice served while others exchanged hesitant smiles. In stark contrast, Greg's face turned pallid as reality struck him hard. Any facade he'd managed to maintain crumbled under the scrutiny Jamal had deftly navigated throughout these proceedings. As Judge Carter adjourned court for the day, Jamal felt a rush of emotions cascade over him. A triumph for truth emerged from what once seemed like insurmountable adversity. In that moment, he realized how vital it had been not only for him, but for anyone seeking justice against unfortunate misinterpretations and misguided accusations. Jamal stood slowly beside Margaret, sharing an embrace that spoke volumes. They were warriors who had fought hard for vindication against adverse odds and together intuitively understood what this victory represented beyond mere innocence. It symbolized hope restored amidst chaotic uncertainty. In the aftermath of his acquittal, a profound sense of relief washed over Jamal as he stepped out of the courthouse, the autumn sun shining brightly above him. For the first time in weeks, he felt an overwhelming weight lift from his shoulders. Throughout the turbulent months leading up to this moment, his life had been overshadowed by doubt and frustration, but now, he could breathe freely again. Gratitude filled his heart, grateful for Margaret, who had believed in his innocence from the very beginning and fought tirelessly on his behalf. As he glanced at her smiling face beside him, he felt a swell of appreciation for her dedication and expertise during this harrowing ordeal. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It wasn't just the verdict that mattered. It was the unwavering support that had bolstered him through a storm of false accusations. Walking down the steps of the courthouse, Jamal reflected on the bitter lessons he had learned throughout this process. He had come to understand that integrity often faces challenges and that truth can be obscured by conflicting narratives and public opinion. The experience had tested him not only legally but emotionally and morally. What it means to stand for one's truth became more tangible, especially when society turned its back on him based on flawed perceptions. But as he stepped into the reality of his exoneration, Jamal resolved to not forget the hardships he'd faced. He vowed to advocate for others caught in similar situations, individuals who find themselves unjustly accused and battling against misrepresentations in a world where truth often gets tangled in assumptions. The importance of advocating for justice rang clear to him. He wanted to help others rebuild their narratives and restore their dignity just as he had done today. Jamal's journey was far from over. While his innocence was declared, healing would take time. Joy swelled within him as he knew that today marked not just a personal victory but potentially a platform for change. He could now raise awareness about how quickly one's character can be undermined without factual foundation and promote initiatives toward empathy in public discourse. As they reached their bicycles parked outside, Jamal held on to Margaret's words from earlier in court. Justice is not merely about winning, it's about uncovering truth. Today illuminated that philosophy perfectly. With renewed purpose flowing through him, Jamal mounted his bike and took a deep breath, ready to ride once more, not only for himself but also for others seeking their freedom from clouds of misunderstanding. With an exhilarated push off the ground, Jamal felt alive, a vibrant testament to resilience capable of overcoming adversity. He began cycling down the path he loved so much, contemplating how a challenging chapter in his life had transformed into an opportunity to advocate for honesty, integrity, and justice for all those who were misjudged. Today was more than an acquittal. It was a new beginning fueled by hope and resolve. In the days following Jamal's acquittal, the atmosphere within his community shifted dramatically. Initially, whispers of skepticism had clouded public opinion as many residents had sided with Greg, believing Jamal to be careless and reckless. However, as the truth emerged through the courtroom revelations and the unconventional truth or lie game, perceptions began to change. News of Jamal's innocence spread quickly through local media and social platforms, sparking conversations among his neighbors and friends. The narrative that once painted him as a villain transformed into one of resilience and courage. As people began to reflect on the events leading to the trial, they realized how easily they had been swayed by partial accounts and sensationalized reports. One afternoon, while Jamal was at the bike shop he worked at, he was surprised to see a small crowd gather outside. Curious faces peered in through the glass windows, some whispering excitedly among themselves. It was a mix of familiar faces, friends he hadn't seen in weeks, and even some who had distanced themselves during the controversy. As he stepped outside, he was met with warm smiles and encouraging words. "We knew you were innocent all along," one neighbor called out, while another chimed in. "You showed them what you were made of." Jamal felt a rush of gratitude wash over him. It was heartening to see those who once viewed him with suspicion now rallying around him. With every handshake and pat on the back, Jamal's heart swelled with appreciation for their support. People began sharing their own stories of facing misunderstandings or misjudgments in their lives, stories that mirrored his own experience of being wrongfully accused. This collective realization fostered a deeper sense of community among them. A local news station even organized a small gathering in the park to celebrate Jamal's victory, a community event aimed at raising awareness about justice and empathy for others who might face similar challenges. As Jamal stood at the podium addressing his neighbors, he felt empowered to share not only his story but the broader message about integrity and accountability. "This experience taught me that we must question narratives before accepting them as truth," he said earnestly. "It's essential that we support one another and stand up for what is right, especially when someone is misunderstood." His words resonated deeply with those gathered. He could see nods of agreement and compassion reflected in their expressions. Jamal's journey had transformed from one of isolation to one of collective strength. He now had a renewed purpose within his community. No longer just a victim of circumstance, he became an advocate for justice and understanding, someone who would help others navigate their own struggles against misrepresentation. As word spread about his involvement in promoting justice initiatives, more individuals reached out to him with stories of their own battles against public misconceptions. With each interaction, Jamal felt empowered to continue advocating for those unjustly accused while reinforcing the idea that integrity should always prevail over misunderstanding in society. The community that once stood divided now rallied together in solidarity, united by lessons learned from Jamal's fight for truth. Jamal's journey through the tumultuous experience of being wrongfully accused underscored several profound themes that resonated deeply within him and his community: truth, integrity, and resilience. Emerging from the courtroom as an exonerated man, he understood more clearly than ever the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The weight of public scrutiny had initially been overwhelming, but the belief in his truth fueled his determination and ultimately led him to victory. The ordeal reminded Jamal that truth is often obscured by misconceptions and that many people tend to accept narratives passively without seeking deeper understanding. His experiences motivated him to advocate for those who find themselves in similar situations, where society's quick judgments can dismantle lives based on incomplete information. He realized how critical it is to challenge assumptions and foster conversations around integrity, especially when dealing with sensitive issues that may impact others unknowingly. Amidst the positive transformation within his community, Jamal became a symbol of resilience, a beacon for those who have suffered from misjudgment. He recognized how vital it was for individuals to believe in themselves and remain steadfast against false accusations. By sharing his story openly, he hoped to inspire others not just to fight for their own truths but to engage in thoughtful dialogue about accountability and empathy. In every conversation he engaged in with those who rallied around him post-acquittal, Jamal heard echoing sentiments of support and understanding. Many shared their battles against public scrutiny, making it clear that no one was truly alone in their struggles. These exchanges became a source of empowerment for Jamal as he weighed the collective experiences against his own fight for justice. He saw that overcoming adversity could lead to growth, not only for himself but also for anyone willing to break down barriers imposed by society. As he planned initiatives focused on raising awareness around issues of misrepresentation, Jamal felt an encouraging sense of purpose fill him. It became essential for him to continue advocating for empathy in public discourse while shining a light on the need for fair treatment regardless of circumstances. His passion ignited a flame within his community. Small gatherings turned into opportunities for discussions where personal experiences were shared, fostering deeper connections among neighbors. Reflecting on his journey, Jamal embraced a hopeful message: through honesty and perseverance, it is possible to reclaim one's dignity even when faced with unjust challenges. His resolve was fortified by incidents that demanded integrity and fearless defiance against falsehoods. The lessons learned would forever guide him in supporting others navigating similar storms. With each pedal stroke on his bike from now on, he carried not just the burden of his past but the promise of a brighter future where truth could triumph over misunderstanding. Jamal recognized this new chapter as both a reward for enduring hardship and a platform from which he could advocate change, a testament to resilience and the enduring belief in justice when meeting adversity head-on.